Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is season 6, episode 21. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. This week, I'm very excited that I finally get to talk to Linda, aka Polysonic, on Instagram. Linda is a professional puppeteer and actually a multidisciplinary visual and performing artist. She created the 9-minute puppet-based short film called Misophonia, which has been going around independent film festivals over the past year. I had a chance to see it and was struck by how it captured a lot of aspects of miso without actually saying any words. We get into a lot of different things in our conversation other than this film, such as using art to describe living with misophonia. We talk about her childhood and an abusive stepfather at home, her mom potentially having it as well, marriage and misophonia, her fear of psychologists, and we also talk about her other job as a librarian and the role of libraries and quiet public spaces. Let me know what you think. You can always reach out by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or find me on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. By the way, please, if you haven't had a chance yet, wherever you listen to this show, you can leave a quick rating or even leave a full review. It helps us move up in the algorithms and reach more listeners who have misophonia. Thanks for the incredible ongoing support of all of our Patreon supporters. If you feel like contributing, you can read all about the various levels at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. All right, now here's my conversation with Linda. Linda, welcome to the podcast. Good to finally have you here.
Thank you, Adil. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So I've been really looking forward to this, and I'm glad because we'll talk about kind of what you do for a living and what you've done related to misophonia. But do you first kind of want to share with folks kind of rough about where you're located? And you've heard me ask that question with people, I'm sure.
I've only been here for 5 years, but I'm in the Finger Lakes area of upstate New York. Before that, I had settled in Connecticut for about 20 years in New Haven, so I feel like I'm still a New Havener. But I grew up in Vermont, Maine, and New Jersey in backwards order. And I am an artist. I was born into a family of artists, so I've been in all different types of arts my whole life. So here I am specifically focusing on puppetry arts, and then I work part-time 3 nights a week in a library, which I'm happy to talk about libraries also.
Okay.
So that's where I am and what I'm doing.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Fascinating stuff. So I guess maybe sometimes when I can go in many directions, I just like to go chronological. Do you want to talk about back in the day for Linda? Like, when did you start to notice something was wrong?
Well, I think that it really hit hard, and I kind of noticed I was different probably in my late 20s.
Mm.
Um, but after listening to your podcast, first of all, with misophonia, I'm 50, so I spent many years before I knew there was a name for it, just kind of trying
Mm-hmm.
to deal with it and not knowing if I was different or not. So it's so integrated into my life that I don't really notice it too much until it becomes an issue. So my late 20s is when I was living with someone where it became very apparent that, that there was a problem. And I tend to avoid things. So I never really looked into it, but then I found your podcast and listening to people. Uh, I had a memory, which I'd always remembered, but I never connected it to misophonia. When I was about 5 years old, I was supposed to sing in the church choir, and I had been doing that apparently since I could. My mom put me in the church choir, and my whole family had come to watch me during a service, and I refused to go on the stage and sing with everybody. And I do remember saying to the choir leader, I I don't want to do it. I don't like hearing people singing close to me.
Mm.
And my mom it was a whole big joke in my family. They were irritated and my family's great, but they were like, "Oh, Linda didn't want to sing in the choir because she doesn't like people singing close to her."
Mm-hmm.
And
Because
nobody
that's
could understand it.
hilarious.
Yeah, it was hilarious. And nobody, this is the early or the mid 70s at that point. Nobody
Mm.
really asked any questions. They just thought, and I was such a good kid. This was my first act of rebellion that I can remember. So it must have been pretty bad where I was actually that brave to say
Mm,
to an adult, I'm not going on. And now I'm like, of course that's what it was. And it was only when I heard you or one of your guests talking about not liking people's voice close, that I was
mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's obviously what it was. So I think I've had it at least since 5 years old. So that's a good 45 years that I've been
Yeah.
dealing with it.
And after that, did in your childhood, did you notice, did you think back and start to notice that it has expanded, or you just didn't notice anything till the 20s, till your 20s?
So I'll say, so I'm going to try to be as candid as possible because people
Yeah.
have been so great on your show and it's helped me so much. And these are all things I don't talk about much.
Mm,
I'm not hiding them, but it's just not something I talk about very often. So we'll see how it
mm.
goes. But
Sure.
I have a pretty big block in the middle of my childhood because I had an abusive stepfather and it was pretty
Mm,
severe from age 9 to 16.
mm,
So I think that I've blocked, I mean, I have a lot of missing memories from that time. And I I don't know. I definitely have memories of being irritated with him eating lobster. This was a
mm,
thing. I can't even remember if it was sound or visual related. And it was also just him. He was a real monster of a person. So I'm kind of these things and there was a lot of sexual abuse as well as mental. So I don't know, like I think when it started becoming a problem in my 20s, I worried that it was something that was coming out of that abuse. And there's
mm,
so many quirky things about myself that I always worried, like, is my personality because of this terrible thing that happened?
mm,
And so when I found this 5 year old memory, I was so relieved in a way. I was like, oh, it's something that was before that time. And
yeah.
somehow, for some reason, that was a real relief. But it's hard to untangle this stuff and figure out what comes from what. But I think that's why I'm missing a big chunk. I don't have memories in college, which was a really good time for me. I don't have memories of anybody specifically bothering me because of sound. It really became when I lived with my first partner. And he is a very fidgety person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
He is kind of the opposite of me. He's a great guy. I still love him very much, but misophonia was a big thing that caused a split in our relationship. And now he's remarried, and he called me the other day saying, "Have you ever heard of misophonia? Because I think my wife."
Oh,
Yeah, so he married a second.
yeah. Well, you can't get away. Once you go misophonia, you don't go back, I guess.
That could be. So I think, he's just the nature of him. He's an actor. He's a very physical person. He's always fidgeting with paper and
Mm,
doing all sorts of things. So that's it. It became obvious there was something unusual about
yeah.
me.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks. Yeah. No, thanks for being candid. I'm sorry that
No, it's
stuff happened.
okay.
But back in well, I guess you mentioned that obviously this monster of a person was a stepfather. But so
Mhm.
back when you were around 5, was there anything with your I don't know, I'm making assumptions, but you probably with your biological father around that time, maybe was there any tension around the house, or anything happening around the time that
Mhm.
you know start to do your rebellious act in church?
Yeah. Well, my father died of cancer when I was
Mm,
4, and
hmm.
I don't have much of a memory of that.
Yeah.
And he had been sick, I think, for a couple of years, and that it was, of course, my mom ended up being a single parent, so
Mm,
I'm sure there was. I mean, she made my life as like she wanted to make my life so amazing, so she did a lot for me. So
yeah.
I had, it was a really good life for me actually,
Hmm.
other than that pressure, which as a kid I don't have too much memory other than her being sad. Like I remember his death, but yeah, I don't know, what maybe there's some connection. Well, probably not. I believe after listening to this podcast that it is wired in there hard. So, but who knows if there's something that brings it out, like some sort of trauma like that
Yeah, there's just it's very often that there is some kind of trauma is a loaded term, but there is like those
Hmm.
small t kind of trauma or things that you pick up from um, maybe observing other people that
Hmm.
that can kind of I don't want to say trigger, but just kind of like help maybe how help is not a good word, but like help misophonia kind of develop
Hmm.
uh, in in you. You're just kind of like there's the whole walking on eggshells um, thing that happens to a lot of us early on that when we're young, and so. Whether it's you don't want to set off, maybe you're, I don't know, I'm making assumptions again. Maybe you don't want to set off your mom who's already feeling sad, or
Hmm.
maybe there's some tension in the house. I'm just saying, often there's misophonia that develops from situations like that. So,
Hmm.
but so yeah, I was just curious. We're all learning, and but yeah,
Hmm.
this is something that we know we've noticed a lot. So I guess then, did you have any siblings around that time?
No, no.
Okay.
They had planned on them, but I was the first and the last.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then well, then maybe let's talk about your 20s. So obviously with that partner just kind of came back with a vengeance in many different ways. I'm assuming. Uh, did it happen right away, or is like once you'd kind of like committed, it started to you start to notice stuff?
Oh, you mean with my partner and
Yeah,
or
right, right.
I can't. I mean, I definitely have always been a loner. And
Hmm.
I'm an artist. I like to be alone a lot. And we lived in a tiny space for the first 4 years of when we were together. Um, and I remember I just was trying to be. I was a children's book illustrator right out of college, and I was so motivated, and all I did was work towards that goal. And he is an
Mm,
actor, and we opened a small theater company together. So I don't feel like in the beginning, I mean, I definitely know there were always things he did that I asked him to stop. But I think as we got older and more, became more repetitive and he didn't stop, I think I started becoming more, uh, I'll just say inside my head, I'm a tremendous asshole.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, we all are.
And I and I think that just got as we were together longer and longer. And we also worked together with a theater company, and he was kind of technically my boss. So I think a lot of that,
Mm,
just exaggerated and made worse the situation. So, and I also had anxiety in my 20s came up. I started having panic attacks, and that's in my family. That's a
mm.
And I think that the stress also brings this out more. So I
Just doesn't
feel
help this misophonia for sure.
and then I started going on meditation retreats later in my 20s, and that's when I started getting more demanding about having quiet time and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't do it, and that was the end.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so and then I feel, and definitely as I'm getting older, it's getting worse. And
Mm-hmm.
as we lived at a Zen. I have a new husband now who's great. He's completely mindful. He's so careful. I've never experienced anything like it before.
Mm-hmm.
And we have meditation retreats, and now we live in this quiet place. I think I'm just becoming less tolerant, and I'm becoming more isolated, sadly, because of that. But so it's been I think, a pretty steady upward line on the graph.
Yeah, a lot of us, yeah, it tends to get worse. It's like it gets the condition gets worse as we get older for one reason or another, and but we also have more a little bit more agency. We can make big decisions like splitting on our partner or going on affording to go on meditation retreats or
Yeah,
or live in the right places. So it's kind of yeah, there's
more
pros and cons.
demanding.
More demand. Yeah, exactly. Um, so, oh, okay, interesting. So in terms of things getting worse, is like the types of triggers or just like your ability to your threshold is lower?
Yeah, I think there's more things.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I definitely, it's funny. I went out, well, I haven't gone out much in the last 2 or 3 years,
Yeah,
obviously.
same.
But I went out with a couple of friends who visited to a cafe, and luckily, everybody has outdoor seating now, which is
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, and I
Mm-hmm.
love this. So I was telling my friends that I'm so happy to eat outside. It's my favorite thing, and I haven't talked to anybody about misophonia until I made this little film that we can talk about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's brought up the conversation. It's kind of a side a byproduct I didn't expect is that, now I'll probably have to explain what this movie is to friends.
Yeah.
And they said immediately, "Oh, do you like to eat outside because of the misophonia?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. I think that's a big part of it." So I don't like restaurants inside too much, but I
Mm.
love outdoor restaurants. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that like the eating thing is pretty much gone. I just erased it. I've been lucky. I've been able to
Mm.
eradicate that out of my life. And my current husband is so careful I don't have any issues unless he's eating by himself and I am trying to concentrate and
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
eating on near me, then I will just
That's game
turn
over. Yeah.
yeah, turn around and look at him and he knows immediately. Usually he knows before I do, actually. He's so intuitive. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's become things like people's speech patterns,
Mm-hmm.
repetitive words. It's going more into talking lately, and I'm finding that really disturbing because now I does that mean I never talk to people or listen to
Right.
the radio or so that's worrisome. And I did have the experience of triggering myself after I made this movie, which I had to
Mm-hmm.
make the sounds that were in the
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
after hearing myself recording them through a little Zoom handy
Mm-hmm.
recorder, I had to listen to myself. And then the next time I did the thing, which usually I don't hear myself, I heard it. So
Ah,
there
yeah.
was a fear that I was going to self trigger myself for the rest of my life, but luckily that's knock on wood. That's been fading. But
Okay.
it's definitely I feel like more. I don't know if they're getting worse or if it's just. I think it's that there's just more of them,
Yeah.
and I don't know how much worse they could get actually. So
Yeah. Let's not think about that maybe.
I
Did when did you find out that it had a name? Like it was a thing?
Yeah, it's definitely that same article that everybody else with the
New York
picture
Times
of the apple
2011.
or whatever. Is that when
Yeah.
it came out? I mean, I don't
That was a big
remember.
one. There may have been more, but yeah, that
I
was a
think it
major
was
one.
I think it was that the title like does the sound of eating drive you crazy? Something
Yeah.
like that.
That's this article, right? The article didn't. The New York Times one from 2011 did not have the word misophonia in the title. It had it in the text, but yeah,
Uh-huh.
the title was some kind of a question like that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I can't remember if I found it or someone sent. It would have to be my partner who would have sent it to me
Mm-hmm.
because he's the only one who really knew about it, I think, or my mom. But so I must have found it by myself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was that, and I was just kind of. I think that I'm still, even all these years later, surprised that not everybody has the same reaction to these sounds. So I guess I was surprised it was a condition. But
Yeah.
I really do know it's not everybody has this, but it's still always sort of like, and really, is this? It needs to be a condition. Isn't just everybody should be quieter.
Yeah. And how did you describe it before you knew it had a name? Like with your partner, how did you?
I don't know. It usually
Yeah.
focused on his eating, and his paper wrapper. That was a big
Mm-hmm.
thing with him. So I don't, I didn't. I put it more on him, like these things that you do, not
Right.
so much myself,
Right.
because I just didn't have the skills
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
being in a good relationship that way. But yeah, so I don't. I mean, I definitely knew it was only me, but I still didn't. Um, I didn't identify with it or call it anything.
And you said your mom may have sent you the article. was she aware that you had sound sensitivities other than that moment when you were 5 years old?
Um, I don't know if we talked about it at
Mm-hmm.
all. I mean, I know I have a lot of quirks that we do as
Mm-hmm.
I call them, that we do talk about. I wonder if she has something
Mm.
like it, because she's the one who always yelled at me for sniffling. She
Mm.
can't stand sniffling. She can't stand certain voice patterns. I wouldn't. She doesn't have any issues that I know of with eating, things
Mm-hmm.
like that that are typical. Um, but she definitely has a strong reaction and gets angry at a few very specific things.
And that's going back even from like from your earliest
Forever,
memories. Yeah. Okay.
forever. Yeah.
Interesting.
But so I don't know that she would have found it unusual that I didn't like a sound, other than the
Yeah.
close singing thing. That's when she didn't. But yeah, it was just her and me, and then for a brief time, for 7 years, the stepfather. So we're a tiny family. We don't have cousins or
Mm-hmm.
brothers or
Oh, okay.
sisters.
Okay.
So maybe, that's part of it. I'm not practiced at tolerating
No
people that
giant
I live
Thanksgiving
with.
dinners. Yeah. Yeah.
No, no, nothing like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well then, maybe I'm just like itching to get to the Misophonia project, but maybe yeah. Do you want to talk about? But even like leading up to that, I'm just curious. Like, what kind of projects you typically work on, and yeah, I'd love to hear about like what led you to come up with the idea of doing a film on misophonia.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out too. But I was trained as a children's book illustrator, which I did
Mm,
for a long time, and I had like I think 7 books published, not writing, just the illustrating part. So I did that full time for 15 years or so, and so I worked alone, also still like in my own studio as a freelancer. But my grandparents were puppeteers. They started in the 1950s a little marionette company. So I grew up a lot with them after my father passed away. And so I grew up with puppet theater, and I didn't really think too much about it. It seemed kind of old fashioned
hmm
and not something I was way more into, the cutting edge children's book market, I guess. Uh, and then well, a bunch of different things happened. I saw a puppet show um, that was based in an Asian form of puppetry called bunraku, which is a direct manipulation puppetry.
mm,
And it was so beautiful, and I'd never seen anything like that before, that I just fell in love with puppetry on my own. And this
mm,
was when I was in college, I think. So my grandparents had already passed away, and I just went all in. I just found out that puppetry is not just Muppets, not just marionettes on strings. It actually is a very cutting edge art form, especially in the U.S. where it doesn't have too much of a tradition. And I just saw like a whole world. I am a visual artist as well as a performing artist. I do some vaudeville, I do some fire spinning, I do some go-go dancing. I've been a living statue, and I love that stuff. So this puppetry brings together the performing and the making into one art form. And so I've been full out dedicated to that for, I think, now probably another 15 years. And mostly that's been live theater on a
yeah.
stage. And then it's a long story. I won't get too much into it, but I started getting into shadow puppetry uh, because of just a bunch of things that happened right before the pandemic.
Uh-huh.
And then the pandemic happened, and it was the perfect time to try to explore putting that on film, because suddenly everybody needed content for their Zoom theater. So
Mm,
I
mm-hmm.
started making little vignettes of shadow puppets that could be on the screen during the pandemic. And then I just I'd never done film before, and I got a commission from Heather Henson, who is one of the daughters of Jim Henson, to make a film. And part of that was going through a bit of a film school for 6 months with film professionals. And the project that I chose was Misophonia, which was an idea I'd had 5 years before. Um, so I can tell you how that how that happened. I
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
I think that the idea started, as most of my ideas, as just a visual picture, because I think mostly visually, and it was of a mermaid on a bus. I'm going to spoil the end of the movie, but that's okay because
Okay.
I don't
Yeah,
think
sure, sure.
misophones don't want to watch this movie anyway. uh, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So I had this image of a mermaid like commuting on a bus and slithering off a bus and going back into the ocean. And I thought I would try this for a conference that I go to where we workshop shows. And then that didn't happen. And over 5 years, it just started developing in my mind. And I love riding the bus and I love riding the train, but I can't
Hmm.
stand the sound. Like
Of
it's
course.
almost unbearable. So all of a sudden, this mermaid in my mind was misophonic and was going to be tortured by sound. And so when this project came up, I submitted it as an idea and they accepted it unbelievably because I had already named it misophonia, which most people don't know what
Hmm.
that is. So it started with this image, and the mermaid is I had been a mermaid as a living statue, so I think she was me already. And as a living statue, I don't speak. I'm mute. I do
Hmm.
mime. So I think that silence, her silence of her character, being this mermaid, kind of invited uh, a contradiction with the sounds that people would be making. So um, I didn't know if it would be a good movie. I don't know if it is, but I needed to make it um, to explore it. Art is my way of thinking and kind of roughing or smoothing out the rough edges between my inner life and the outer world. So for me, it was just amazing to really dive into thinking about this and then giving it an ending. I gave a source of misophonia by saying she's a mermaid, so she's just different. So even
Ah.
though there's no cause that we know of, or we don't know why there is misophonia, I kind of satisfied myself by giving it a reason. I think so. I think that's the best thing about art is like you're able to create a world where something is resolved where
Hmm.
it isn't in your life. So that's how it came about.
Yeah, it's a little magical realism kind of thing.
It is.
Um,
Yeah, that's exactly the category I would say.
Interesting. Okay. And when you say you were you're using it to explore, is exploring literally like misophonia, the feel. I haven't seen the film yet. I've been trying to, but I guess I think
I
I missed when it was at that film festival. Um, but yeah.
I haven't made the subtitled version yet. So
Oh, okay.
I
Well,
haven't.
yes. So you're saying you already think you don't you don't recommend it for music films. I'm assuming because there's tons of trigger sounds
Yeah, I
that
mean,
usually be recorded. Yeah.
I made them as gentle as I could, so I could
Hmm.
bear it. But yes, no. Anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, do you want to maybe talk through kind of the quote unquote plot? It's not like a 2 hour film, right? It's a
No.
short film. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's pretty simple. It's 9 minutes, and
Hmm.
you see a woman in a in front of a library reading a book, which happens to be Moby Dick, and she's waiting for the bus, and the bus comes along, and it's empty with a happy bus driver, and she gets on the bus, and she's happily reading, and the whole movie is the this bus moving through the city and picking up more and more people, and every time there's a bus stop a new sound is introduced. So it starts with the
Mm.
crinkling paper, my ex's favorite,
Hmm.
and then it goes through coffee slurping, a Game Boy, tapping, like kind of my mid level. I didn't add any of I couldn't deal with eating things like that. So
Yeah.
I kept it as
Lobster. Yeah.
no, there's no lobster in this movie. So and it's paper puppets, so they don't intrinsically have a lot of facial expressions. So that was a challenge of trying to make her look like she's more and more distressed by these sounds and unable to concentrate on her book. And then after the bus is completely full, and I had to build this soundscape of just a cacophony of sound, and there is no dialogue, there's no words.
Mm-hmm.
The bus leaves the city and it goes to the sea, where there's a bus stop that says sea. And she gets off the bus leaves, and all of this sound just disappears into the sound of waves. And
Mm.
then we see that she's actually a mermaid holding her library book. And then she disappears into the ocean. And that is it.
Yeah. And is there any other like a music accompanying, or is it mainly that the sound is
Nope,
this?
all sound, all
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sounds. So it's all built from, I found some sounds online of
Mm-hmm.
like old vintage buses. So there's a lot of bus sounds, there's city sounds. And then it switches to the inside of the bus where you hear the people sounds. So I had to build, yeah, and I've never done this before in my life, like make soundscapes. So this was a learning thing for me. But I'd say like half of the movie really is sound. It really
Yeah, yeah,
relies
yeah.
on the sound. Mhm.
And you were building it in probably Logic Pro or Final Cut or something like that, and just kind of
Um,
like loop. Were you
Premiere.
looping stuff? Oh, Premiere. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just did it. I didn't even have time to learn. What is the other Adobe? There's the other Adobe Audition or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Right, right,
Yeah,
right,
that's
right.
on my list of things to learn because it wasn't too easy doing it
Yeah.
in Premiere. But just it's about like 40 tracks in
Mm-hmm.
Premiere. Yeah, and no, I would reuse the sounds definitely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they're and my
Because
one of
usually the sounds are very like spontaneous, like they're very instantaneous. So I'm curious, kind of like how did you um how did you make the cacophony? Because it's you obviously had to like either copy and paste or
yeah.
loop or something like that.
Oh, it's so hard, and
Must
I
have been
don't.
very tedious. Yeah.
It was. It took forever, and I actually built the soundtrack before I filmed.
Mm.
I made
Mm-hmm.
an animatic, so I put my storyboard into Premiere and then built the soundtrack. And I thought that it was going to be just kind of a placeholder, and I would learn better how to grab
Sure.
sounds, and that ended up being the final soundtrack. And it could be a lot better. Like there's definitely many things that could be better, but it was really hard making the sounds uh, like you could hear the individual sound and relate it to a specific character without getting mushed together with all these other sounds that are there.
Right.
And I am still looking to learn how to do that, but I would up the volume on that particular moment and lower everything else, probably in a pretty clumsy way, but that was my idea. But very hard, and
Yeah. There's that.
especially if you hate the sound and you have to hear it.
There's tricks you could do like that. You can change the EQ, change the reverb, maybe remove the reverb
Oh gosh.
on stuff that you want to focus on, things like that.
See that I
So
should talk to you
I
beforehand.
would love to work on your next project for sure, anytime. Um, and what was kind of reaction you got
Well,
from the
my
film?
so we it was fantastic in making it. We had a cohort. I
Mm-hmm.
think there were 8 filmmakers who were mostly stage puppeteers moving into film for the first time, like me.
Mm.
And then we had 3 main advisors, and then we had guests who would come in and give us some advice. And all the time, I got that the sounds were not irritating enough. And I just
These
said,
were from non-misophones, I'm
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And and that was an issue. And then it became, I realized on my own that I didn't know who I'm making this movie for other than myself, because I would never ask someone with misophonia to watch this movie until I have
Mm-hmm.
this subtitle or closed caption.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
also, if you don't have, I mean, some people could relate to a few things. They'd say, "Oh, this really irritates me," but it wasn't quite the same. Um, so I think people understood it. I asked for feedback from friends who had never seen it, and they got the plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but it's also, puppets are not the most popular art form, and I'm pretty happy working in a weird medium that is
Yeah.
pretty niche. So it's only been shown so far online. It is being submitted to film festivals, and it's going to be in a DVD collection coming out from Henson in the future at some point.
Mm.
So it hasn't been seen too much, so I haven't gotten a ton of feedback yet, but
Yeah,
hopefully
no,
soon.
yeah, no. Well, if that, yeah, I'll definitely buy that DVD and yeah, let me know if it gets in any film festivals. Yeah, I'll definitely promote that. Have you thought about I don't know, doing a sequel or just maybe
uh,
incorporating other aspects of misophonia in some of the other work?
I haven't. Yeah, I mean, this was
Hmm.
so, you know, rough, like having to
Yeah.
listen, like
Oh,
having to
right,
listen to
right,
this.
right, right, right.
But I did. There is one character of this crowd that is on the bus who's a child. He has a fish. He was there's these little clues that she's from the ocean planted throughout the movie. So there's a fish store that people are waiting at the bus stop in front of, and he has a little bag holding a goldfish. And in my mind, he's concerned that this goldfish is trapped. And I think you even maybe pointed out, like, she's trapped on this bus very similarly as
Hmm.
that fish. She's stuck in this glass, enclosure, not able to get out.
Yeah.
And she so I had this idea that this boy was really interesting because he's the only one who notices her. When the bus leaves, he's looking back to look at her. It's like
Hmm.
nobody else really notices that there's this person that is so not even a person, it's a mermaid, and she looks different even from the get-go, even before you see her tail. So nobody notices her, this distress, which is my general experience, except for this boy. So I had the feeling that this boy might have some sort of sequel, that maybe he is reunited with her in some way, and they meet. So I do have something in mind. I don't know what it would be yet, but that, yes, that, so there's a little spin-off that might
Oh, I love
happen.
that device of having that the parallel of the goldfish that's trapped, and then she's also trapped in the bus. Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of referring to. Is like there's I mean there's obviously so many aspects and secondary effects of having misophonia, as you and your first partner have experienced, and there's it's so many different dimensions that I think there's like a very unexplored landscape of creative
So much.
possibilities with misophonia,
Mhm.
which non-misophons would listen to this and be like, "What are you talking about? You're just annoyed by sounds." Um,
Yeah, but I think everyone could relate to the isolation.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
sometime in everyone's life, at some point, they must feel different and not understood or not noticed. Or
yeah. Different, misunderstood. Have feel like one thing. Speaking of uh, niche art forms, like I've only very recently become obsessed with musical theater, partly because I was like, I made the connection between musical theater being like breaking out into these outrageous song and dances related to the thoughts that go on in our head when we're triggered. I mean, it's so outrageous. I was
ah,
like,
wow.
yeah. So that's why my
Oh,
initial thought has been to make a musical about Misophonia, not necessarily like a big song and dance, like a vaudeville style. But although that'd be ridiculous too, I'm very interested in. I'm into like absurd art forms and Dadaism and whatever. So I feel like
oh,
that this is
wow.
kind of the direction I kind of want to explore. Um, is to kind of like have musical theater as kind of a metaphor or parallel with the thoughts, the parallel life that we have in our heads
That's
sometimes. So
amazing. That's the form that I was working in with my ex. He was a musical theater person, and he
hmm
would write a lot of his own music, but also some reviews. I never thought of, I never made that connection before. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's
yeah,
a inner outburst.
yeah, the inner monologue that we have is so crazy that
It's it's as crazy as musical theater.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I never really, I was never into to the theater kids when I was growing up, probably because well, growing up in an East Asian, South Asian, Indian culture, that's not, not really any kind of art form is not particularly recommended or encouraged. So,
Oh,
theater just seemed really kind of odd and out there and very much the white kids. And so it's taken a while for me to like look at stuff from a different perspective. And I don't know. Yeah, Misophonia was just kind of like, oh, okay, wow. And I see somehow I can kind of connect with musical theater because at least from the this potential outlet or way to express emotion is
Hmm.
something I can relate to.
What about
So
Bollywood? Bollywood is
yeah,
so
I was
like very
yeah. It just
so
seemed a
big.
little yeah. It just seemed yeah. Well, yeah, I was never into like Bollywood culture because it tended to well I was into indie movies and different kinds of plots and themes for let's just say Bollywood
Mhm.
just seemed a little too cookie cutter and just everything seemed the same and
Mhm.
yeah, kind of cheesy.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe I think maybe I originally thought musical theater was kind of cheesy, but then I kind of started to think a little bit more about what it could um well, then I was introduced to literally in the last couple of years, like people like Stephen Sondheim and oh, okay, there's more of a
Mhm.
psychological aspect, which I never
Mhm.
realized before. I
Wow.
just thought it was just vaudeville entertainment,
Mhm.
which I don't mind anymore. I don't know. I kind of get it. I just
Wow,
took my
that's
first tap dance lesson this week. Speaking
no
of
kidding.
just doing stuff I would never thought I'd do. So
Oh, that's so interesting.
which we'll see how that
Do you
works for
like,
my
yeah,
misophonia.
I was gonna
We'll
say, do
see.
you
Yeah,
like the sound of tap?
we'll see. We'll see. I don't mind it so much because if it's done musically, because
Hmm.
it's kind of like playing drums with your feet, then I can see how it would be okay. But
That's true. Did
we'll see.
have you heard of this? I think it's Mr. Freer's ears. I think that's his name. It
Hmm.
so
Wait a minute. Okay, wait. Are you the one who? Wait,
I
is this? Are
think
you talking about?
I think I
Yeah.
did
Hmm.
message you. It's I think it's Nickelodeon or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this.
yeah. I think it
Like
was you who sent it to me a while back. I totally forgot about it, but I did watch it. Yeah, it's
I
and I'll
can't believe
share
it
this.
exists.
Yeah. So listeners, what Linda's telling me about is and you can describe it as well, but but now I remember it's from the 90s on Nickelodeon. I guess there was like a short I think they were just 5 10 minute little clips of was it always somebody not I know one of them is somebody that the dude it's like a guy who's going around there's no words but he goes to different situations and he just hears normal sounds but in a rhythmic kind of almost like a beat. So I remember one where he's sitting in a barber's chair and
Yeah.
then he hears the scissors and the comb and everything is kind of like played um in kind of like a rhythmic performance kind of thing.
But
So
he is irritated. He
yeah,
always runs away, but he does hear it as if it's a
yeah,
percussive,
right.
and I can listen to it that way. Like you were saying, like if it's
Hmm.
musical, I can hear those sounds, but yet he has to run, and it always starts with the camera zeroing in on his ear. So it's so interesting. And that was another person, a sound designer, pointed me to that. He loved this piece. So
Yeah, that's interesting because obviously there was no term for misophonia back then, so you got to wonder
mhm.
if whoever did that was trying to get the point across, but
I
didn't
think
have.
so. I think
Yeah,
so. I have to. I should investigate more about who did it and
yeah.
find them.
Actually, yeah, we'll go to IMDb and find that out. Sound designer. Um, yeah, that's super interesting. But that's also what I mean, writing as I'm writing songs, I'm thinking about using triggers and um, as like percussive elements, like maybe hi hats or parts of a
Oh,
snare. If you add enough reverb and manipulate sounds enough,
mm,
you can make them. Actually, and there was Marcello, a recent
yes,
episode.
yeah,
You heard that one, right?
that was great. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think this is amazing that people are starting to use start to um incorporate misophonia and not just like that obvious stuff like I'm annoyed by sounds,
Mhm.
but it's trying to use it more. I don't know, just trying to explore it creatively. I think it's an
Mhm.
untapped landscape.
Mhm.
So
There's a few film festivals that are will take a silent film and orchestrate live
mm,
to the film. And
mm.
I want to submit Misophonia to a couple of those and see if anybody would be interested in making musical version of those sounds. in a way that
Hmm.
I would be able to, to watch
Yeah.
the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see if anybody bites on that one.
Yeah, that's the thing. What I was thinking about, like, would a musical make sense, or honestly, like, the no misphones would go see it. Not that I would want to put a lot of triggers into it, but I'm wondering if maybe, yeah, just like a film version, kind of like what you did,
Yeah,
um,
I
would
love it.
work.
I would go see
Mm.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyways, no, I'd love to. Yeah, kind of like brainstorm some ideas about that stuff later. So and when you released, I guess you're still in the process of releasing it, I guess. But
Yeah,
has it kind of like introduced you to other misophones in any way? It sounds like you haven't really talked about misophonia in general, right? But
yeah.
I'm
No,
curious if you were able
mhm.
to, yeah.
No, no. I think before I shared it with anybody with misophonia, I definitely want to take out. Like I'm so worried about bothering people. I would want to take out those sounds and make a little like this is, I mean, you can see the action being done by these
Yeah.
paper puppets, but I wanted to leave the ambient soundtrack but take out those particular sounds. So, but yeah, I don't have any that I know of misophones in my life in any case to
Hmm.
talk to, so it's not come up. And yeah, and we're still trying to release this movie in different ways, so it's still in the ether.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, okay, cool. And and it's always gonna be recorded. It's not like you're gonna. I would imagine probably you would never want to do a live version of it.
No, definitely.
Yeah,
Well, you know what? Who knows?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it could be. There could be an interesting way. But who would come to see it? Theaters is rough. This is
Mm,
great. I can make it and just send it out, but you have to ask people to come to, to a live theater show, so it's a lot
right,
harder.
right.
Yeah.
So, what are your maybe talk about like just kind of coping methods? It seems like, I mean, you said you've kind of almost eradicated the eating noises mainly because like you eat outside at restaurants, and then your husband's very attentive. Like, are you doing the headphones when you go in public, earplugs, things
Yep.
like that, or?
Yeah, my Sonys that I'm wearing right now, my Sony
Mm-hmm.
noise canceling, I can't live without them. I work in a studio space with 44 other artists, and
Ooh,
it's called Artist Alley. I have my own space, but they're basically a giant cubicle with walls that are very tall, but then it's open up above,
mm,
and you can hear everything that everybody does. And yeah,
yeah,
there's rules there, but people
right.
love to do things like play their music on their phone, make
Oh,
that tinny sound, or talk to
yeah,
their friends through speakerphone. And I
yeah.
couldn't I couldn't survive it. These headphones have saved my life. They're just fantastic. And then other places. I mean, so I work in a library 3 nights a week, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's
Okay.
actually the hardest part of my time because
Yeah.
it's not quiet in a library.
No.
And if it is, you hear everything double. And also, I think the expectation when you feel like you are owed quietness and you don't get
Right.
I have a worse reaction because I feel justified uh, in my terrible thoughts.
Yeah.
So so there, I mean, usually I'm a definite runaway. I don't confront. I'm amazed.
Flight. Yeah.
I'm a definite flight person, and I'm amazed hearing your other guests who have the ability to go up to somebody and ask them. I'm I just can't even imagine, and I'm so
Yeah.
impressed. And when I get stuck, if I can't leave, I don't know what to do. I have like I just go crazy, and
Freeze. There's the fight, flight, or freeze. And
yeah,
sounds like, yeah.
yeah. Well, I don't, I've had incidents where I've just become like a toddler or something, where if I was stuck in a situation and someone is doing something, I will like take something and slam it down on the ground
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
not even engage that person, just to like let my anger be known, and they have no idea, I'm sure, of what my problem is, and then I'll run away in any way I can. So I have this weird fight, but not really, and then flight.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I cannot, and no amount of preparing myself seems to be able to I can't grab myself back at that moment. No, I'm
Mm,
just lost in my.
yeah.
So I think there is some fight in there, but I'm so concerned uh, about my how I'm perceived. I don't want to be a terrible person, and my inner thoughts are terrible that I do this weird sort of thing, which just makes me look far worse, I'm sure.
Yeah. Did it take a while to come back down from
Yeah,
that?
yep, yep,
Yeah.
definitely. I'd say hours, depending on
Yeah.
how bad it is. Yeah, and
Right.
I
Right.
think
Right.
how could they not know, how could anybody do that? What is this terrible thing?
Have you ever gone like have you ever has there ever been a time when you did kind of lose it?
Um, I mean, I have lost it on a couple of people, not because of
Mm,
misophonia. In general,
mm,
I restrain myself and I bury things until I can't
yeah.
stand it anymore. But and that comes, I'm sure, a lot from my past, like just the inability to confront, uh, problems. But I don't, I've never lost it, even though that's the worst reactions I probably have inwardly. I've never really lost it on it. I've never burst out, other than the slamming something down on the desk and walking away. That's as far
Yeah.
as it's ever gone so far. Who knows? I don't know.
And have you ever brought it up with a professional, like a therapist of any kind, psychologist or anything?
I have a great fear of psychologists. I have respect, but I'm fearful of going through my past. Like I'm always worried that this is going to be brought up again. But I did during COVID when I had to work at the library at the front desk. We were having issues of what I felt was a lack of respect during that time before there were vaccines.
Yeah.
We were being treated kind of poorly.
Ugh.
So I did end up seeing our like I guess it's like a workplace a
Mm-hmm.
counselor through my job. And I saw her maybe 10 times. First time I've ever seen a therapist of any type. Pretty late in
Oh,
life. Yeah, I've never, my family is very much like you don't bring your problems to anybody. You just go on,
oh, mine's the
which,
same way.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've never seen anybody until then. And that was I did mention it to her. She was, "Oh, is that thing where like sounds irritate you?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's the thing." We never talked about it again, but we did talk about my just in general of my inability to when people were doing things in the library that were related to COVID, like
Mm,
problematic.
mm-hmm.
Um, this thing about me slamming things down and running away came up, and that was the first time I had ever noticed and connected it to my past. But no, I've never talked to anybody in any form about misophonia
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
until you, really, and other than my poor ex and just people in my
Yeah.
close to me.
And our Instagram DMs where you're sharing clips of Nickelodeon videos and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
So what are some of
amazing.
the and since listening to the podcast, like listening to everybody, it seems like you've listened to a lot of episodes. What are some of the I don't know, are there things that you've learned that you're now incorporating in your life, or just kind of thinking about maybe
Yeah,
that are helping?
yeah, just like this, it's just been this dark, cloud, or like this closet I've never really looked into before. Like I knew it was there and I had to deal with it. And I'm lucky in that I have jobs often where I don't have to do anything about it,
Hmm.
especially when I was working alone. But so listening to other people is just incredible because it's the first time where I was like, oh, you know, so many people have thought about it so carefully, and then when they say these
Yeah.
things, and one of them that I remember was people talking about dogs barking, and
Hmm.
then people talking about animals doing the same thing, not triggering you. And I
Hmm.
was like, wow, the only time an animal has bothered me is the dog barking, and I think it's because I feel like a human should do something about it. You know, I
Yeah.
don't care when the coyotes, we have a lot of coyotes, we have cows, they don't bother me. But the dog barking, I feel like, well, humans should do something. Like maybe the dog is unhappy or, and then I
Mhm.
get triggered. But so it's so specific to the human activity. And that, I never even noticed that before. It never even occurred to me. So I think that listening, like things like that, I've gotten more curious about it rather than just in despair, I'd say.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I said, there's a lot of fascinating dimensions that you don't really think about necessarily when you first think of an annoyance to sound.
and so now I just want to know more about it, and I rather than just hating it. So
Yeah,
it's
right.
really fantastic. It's such a great service that you've done. I can't even begin to tell you. So it's wonderful, which is why I wanted to come on and add my contribution
Oh no,
for
it's good to hear.
posterity.
And yeah, well, no, at least I think you're making an ongoing contribution. Just yeah, I love when it gets explored in art. It's out there in the world, and people can think about it and hopefully get inspired to create their own works.
I
As
think,
honestly, that yours kind of inspired me to think about. I think it was one of the earlier versions of earlier instances of something just being about misophonia. So I think others will do some
yeah,
pieces as well.
I hope so. And I hope, yeah, I hope everybody makes art. I think it's just good for everybody. But I hope some people maybe make puppet art and then
Yeah,
let me know.
no, I think that's a fascinating. I mean, I'm sure. As probably cliche, people mention that they love, being about John Malkovich is one of my favorite movies, and
Oh,
I'm
it's
sure
great.
that,
No, that's a
but
good one. I mean, usually people say, "Oh, the Muppets." You mean like which are
no,
great?
oh
They're
no,
great,
yeah,
but there's so much more. And being John Malkovich is fantastic puppetry in that movie.
and speaking of, there's something I don't know if this is similar, but have you seen the movie Magic with Anthony Hopkins?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm
Well,
writing it down.
yeah, yeah. So it's not specifically puppet, but he's a ventriloquist, and
Oh.
but he's is it's kind of I don't want to say a horror movie, but he is Anthony Hopkins is he's obviously got some kind of well, there's some mental issues, and I would highly recommend watching it. It's from the '70s, so it's even cooler because you get to see like life and I think it's actually around your neck of the woods, so somewhere in the Northeast.
Ah,
Uh, but um, but yeah, I mean, you get to see it. I love old movies, but yeah, it's super interesting because Anthony Hopkins obviously has clear mental issues, and this his ventriloquist doll is part of let's just say it's part of the goings on in some of the bad stuff that happens. So
I mean, usually in
there's a decline. There's definitely a decline of mental state of Anthony Hopkins in the movie,
I
and
feel like if there's puppets in a movie, it's usually going to be bad.
yeah, right, right,
There's definitely a puppet fear in our culture. So yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I enjoy it nonetheless. So
It's actually I think it's directed by some pretty big director. Oh, Richard Attenborough is actually he went on to then direct Gandhi next. So,
oh
um,
wow. Wow.
so anyways, but well, yeah, Linda. I mean, yeah, this has been fascinating. Um, any yeah, we're kind of about an hour into it. Any kind of thing else you want to share with people who are listening?
Oh God, I feel like everybody knows more than I do. Like I have no advice except maybe don't, live the life I did for 45 years of trying to bury misophonia. I mean, I don't know. I think now with the internet and your podcast, it just people being able to connect and
Hmm.
know that they're not, terrible people is fantastic. And to be young and grow up that way, I think is really great. I I would say about libraries, which I think a lot of
Yes.
people have complained. Libraries seem to be on a trend of becoming like modern and upbeat, and therefore they think there needs to be a lot more noise and group activity in libraries.
Yeah, it's turning into maybe like a place to hang out and do
Yeah,
different
it's a, so
things.
and
And
which is great.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's wonderful, but they are doing it to stay relevant. But I work the front desk, there's tons of people who wish that there were still quiet spaces, but they don't get really heard by library staff. So
Mm,
I would say if anyone wants to send a letter to your library asking to preserve quiet space, I think it could be helpful. It's definitely library administrators, and I work in an academic library, so maybe it's different, but I would say ask for quiet space again, and maybe if enough people make that voice heard, we can get our quiet libraries back because
yeah, I was.
they were so great.
No, I was thinking about that, and recently, well, honestly, I was thinking about almost recording this episode in our local library because my neighbor is about to get his roof replaced, and so
Oh,
I'd be hearing banging constantly. But luckily, it was raining today, so he's not getting it replaced. But yeah, I mean, so I was thinking of going into one of those quiet rooms, which seem to like slowly disappear, like being
yeah,
able to like sign up.
yeah,
But even in those rooms, and I think even if you don't have to, even if you don't, if the library doesn't create more more quiet spaces. I mean, I think there's a lot of people libraries can do in the architecture and the interior design to like soften, like
yes,
to
yeah,
put like soft, uh, blanket or just carpet. It's just kind of like think about those little details that can absorb sound would make, I
hmm
think, a big difference.
and they're not
Maybe.
doing. They're definitely not doing that now.
Hmm.
Yeah,
No,
no.
and then some of these, I mean, to your point of the cubicles with the high walls, I mean, sometimes there's just too much space, like
Yeah.
for somebody to cough, and then it goes and reverberates up, all over the place. So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be
That could
done
be done
there.
if people know that it's needed. I think we just, in general, quietness has been really left behind. It's not a, most people don't, most people I think who want that don't speak it because
Oh
they're
yeah.
quiet.
Although, and when you go to, I mean, a lot of the theaters and art galleries around town here now have, the sensory hours or whatever. Like some grocery stores
Oh,
have that
yes, I
too.
have heard of that. Uh-huh.
So that seems to hopefully will
Huh.
become more of a trend. I think the autism community has been kind of spearheading that, but I think we should kind of jump on that train and support that.
Oh, yeah, that's
Um,
great. Yeah, we don't
so,
have that around here that I know of, but I hope that becomes more popular. That's
mm-hmm,
great.
mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, there might be some. Yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes you see, sometimes you see sensory friendly hours pop up on Facebook, like for a gallery putting on an event. I think we should
Oh, that's fantastic.
maybe do a search. I bet there is something with so much art or so many artists around your area.
Yeah,
Uh,
it could be. I will look. And what's the typical phrase that's used?
sensory friendly. Yeah,
Sensory friendly. Okay,
sensory friendly.
great.
So, and it's not just sound, and honestly, it happens at grocery stores too, where there'll be like an hour or two where they
Oh.
say they will turn down the lights, they will not collect the shopping carts, they will turn off the beeps or lower the beeps at the cash register.
Really? No
Yeah.
kidding. That's
Hmm.
amazing.
Somebody's
I've
put a lot of
never.
thought into this. and
Wow.
then uh and then in I'll go to a theater, like a children's theater or whatever, and then there's like a room at the back where you can sit, and this is usually for kids who might be hyperactive or might
Wow.
have be autistic, but yeah, there's, I don't know, it's becoming more of a thing. Hopefully
That's wonderful.
it'll come back to libraries.
Yeah.
So
Maybe I'll submit that in our
you should get a promotion, and
yeah,
yeah,
that would be
from your
great.
amazing ideas. Yeah. um Cool. Well, yeah, Linda, thanks again. I think, yeah, I would love to talk. Yeah, to keep talking at a later date as well. But this was good to finally have you on and kind of hear your story
It
after
was so
admiring your
great.
work from afar digitally.
Likewise. Yeah, and I really look forward to all the art you're gonna make too. It's gonna be I'm just really glad to meet you. I'm so glad that I found this podcast. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Linda. It was a real joy talking to you and about this film, which I wish the best as it makes it through the world. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hellomisophoniapodcast.com or go to the website misophoniapodcast.com. It's easiest to just send a message on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast, Facebook at Misophonia Podcast, Twitter at Misophonia Show. Support the show by visiting the Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia podcast. Theme music is always by Monkey. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.